So, hello, I'm Timi, and I would like to talk to you about some ancient Lolita fashion, or what it used to look like in the 70s, 80s, and 90s in Japan. I didn't live then. I was born in 2001, but I find it really interesting to see and look at what everything used to look like, how it was. So obviously, this information is not mine, but it's just stuff that I read and I find super interesting, and I would like to share it with all of you. So, first of all, I see some Lolitas in here, but not many. So just in case you don't know what Lolita fashion is, it's alternative fashion that started in Japan in the late 80s, and the main inspirations are Victorian Rococo and 50s fashion, and obviously there is really no way to connect a specific era directly to Lolita or find the direct influence, but we can see influences in Lolita in all of these. For example, the cute and girly silhouettes, or the elegance, or all the details and lace. So all of these in some way contributed and inspired Lolita. But if we look at Lolita fashion today, just so we can compare it later to what it used to be, then we can look at some of my friends and me, but today Lolita is really characterized by a big bell-shaped skirt, lots of petticoats, frills, lace, and headdresses can be anything from berets to bows. So people really experiment a lot. And the prints on dresses can be anything from fruits, historic, antique-inspired prints, to gothic and cutesy animals, or just full color. So today the options are really unlimited for everything you could ever want in Lolita. But if we want to look at history, obviously we cannot cover everything because 30 years is a lot, and we could go even further back. But I decided to start first in the 70s, because then a lot of things that seem really influential, even at first glance, happened. And I think it's a good place to start, because starting from the Victorian era would be a very, very long lecture. So these are pictures, and we will meet these types of pictures with every decade, because this very helpful book, which is called The Dictionary of Gothic and Lolita, was published a few years back, I think, and it's completely in Japanese, and I don't speak Japanese, but I looked at some of the pages and translated some stuff so we can look. So it's directly from people who used to publish Gothic Lolita Bible and actually lived at that time, and it includes several pages which document the influences on Lolita fashion. So here, just to give an example of how this works, the numbers represent parts of what people were wearing that used to inspire Lolita today. So for example, in the 1960s, we have these short dresses, which usually have maybe a miniskirt length, but they include large hair ribbons, and they have quite large yokes, and these were very popular, and they are still popular in Lolita. So maybe some of these elements kind of stuck around. And in the 1970s, in comparison to like short dresses and miniskirts in the 1960s, dresses became way longer and usually ankle length. And at this time in America, also prairie girl style was very popular, so long, lacy, floral dresses, for example, like Gansacks and stuff like that. So from the 1970s, what survived until today is fluffy long hair, of course, and long dresses with gathered frills, which frills are, of course, extremely important for Lolita fashion. Then small floral prints, which are still very, very popular with classic Lolitas, and lace-up boots, which I think are just a forever statement item for anyone who wears any historically inspired fashion. So if we look at the 1970s, I made us a little nice timeline, which we can look at. So 1970s marked really an explosion in kawaii commercial culture. Of course, kawaii culture has a history way back, but in 1971, the Sanrio founder noticed that when he was selling gift items, the ones that were very decorative were selling way better. So he hired a cartoonist to design him a character to go along with his merchandise, and that's how in 1974, Hello Kitty was created, which, of course, no one could have predicted that this cat would have an influence on the world for decades since. But what he said about the designing of Hello Kitty, that when they created Hello Kitty, they were looking for something that could appeal both to children and adults, something simple yet distinctive. So if you notice, Hello Kitty doesn't have a mouth, so you can project any emotion you want on her, and she will feel the same as you. So of course, when every other company saw Hello Kitty, they had to have their own characters. So for example, Peko-chan with her stuck-out tongue, and of course then every other Sanrio character followed. And this really created competition and made a more nuanced definition of what it means to be kawaii, since all the characters are super different. So of course, when we look at the year 1970, doll-like aesthetic was super, super popular. So of course, Milk was founded, which is really the point where I wanted to begin this story. And then we'll look at Pink House in 1973, and of course, something super close to my heart, the history of Angelic Pretty. So, Milk. So Milk is, since its conception, had kind of like a duality, which was frilly, lacy, cutesy designs, but we also like a punk elements and like a spoiled, rotten girl. So this is their own motto or a poem which describes the creation of Milk, which is that it was the year 1970, and high above the city, up in the sky, God was about to drink his cup of milk, and drip, drip, he accidentally tipped over his glass, and milk went pouring down right on top of Harajuku, so he decided to change the spelled milk into a shop called Milk. And originally, the founder of Milk, which is Hitomi Okawa, opened shop in 1970, and it was located in the in between central apartments. It was really like a narrow hallway, and the walls were plastered with psychedelic posters and clothes, and lots of like flower children type girls really gravitated here. And the walls were covered in clothes, but what they all had in common that they were made from good fabrics, had really nice trims, and were super small in size and extremely expensive. So lots of aspiring milk girls really couldn't wear this style. So what ended up happening is that most people who wore milk were celebrities or idols, which inadvertently started a trend of brands making items specifically for idols. But it was just an accidental consequence, but nowadays it's super popular for brands to make these types of clothes. So this picture is from the first store in 1970. The timeline of the other pictures is kind of sketchy because it's very hard to pinpoint precise times for some photos, since internet didn't exist and people scan and upload those photos later. But I think that this is generally the style of what was happening at that time, which you can definitely see Lolita influence. And some people credit Milk as a first Lolita brand, but that is slightly questionable, since some of the designs do appear old school Lolita, but they weren't producing mainly this. So that depends on what you really want to say. So then another important style which a lot of people credit with influencing Lolita is Otome and Natural K. So for those people who are really not familiar, Natural K is, the Otome means maiden, and the Otome is really a more toned down style, but Natural K is characterized with long dresses, lots of layers, prints, florals, flowy fabric, and really inspired by the prairie girl style, but also by French fashion, such as Rococo. And the connection to French fashion really sometimes makes people say that Otome and Natural K evolved into Lolita fashion, but it doesn't appear to be exactly true, because they have a long standing history and have always been separate. So since they might have inspired Lolita, and lots of Lolitas do wear, for example, Pink House, which is a very notorious Natural K brand, I wouldn't say that it's a pre-Lolita of some sort, but you can see how these types of clothes were really popular at that time. So I also want to say something about Pink House, though, because Pink House was the most popular brand and still is. And if you search for Natural K in Japan, you really wouldn't find anything, because this term doesn't exist. What does exist is mostly like Pink House style, or style named after brands. So people who wear this style would call themselves Pink House Pink House style and stuff like that. And Pink House is really distinct. Like if you see it, you know that it's Pink House because they have really long dresses with frills, ribbons, lots of prints, animals, bears, florals, everything. And it is not designed to emphasize the shape of your body, which is also another connection to Lolita because it's really easy to wear it in a Lolita way. So you can wear it in a similar way. So if you wear Lolita, you would probably really enjoy this style as well. And lots of the dresses for Pink House have buttons at the front. I think you can see them. And what it's made to is that you should wear many layers and then wear it bustle style. So you unbutton some of them so you can show off the many layers underneath. But you can, of course, just wear them casually, just one dress. But it is one of the main features of Pink House, and you will usually see this in their marketing and photos. And these are ads, very old advertisement. I think these are probably from maybe 80s, 90s, but still I think it's really nice to see how really Pink House style hasn't changed at all. If you look at Pink House today, it still looks almost exactly the same as what they were making back then. So now, let's talk about my favorite topic, of course, Angelic Pretty. But if you Google it, you'll really quickly see that, yeah, Angelic Pretty, or Pretty, was founded in 1979, but Angelic Pretty wouldn't come to be until 2001. And before that, they were really a select shop called Pretty. And it was founded by Hiroka Honda in 1979 as a select shop, and it was in La Forêt, Harajuku, which was a new building just opened the year before. And before that, it was the central location for the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So I think that's a pretty funny coincidence. So La Forêt, Harajuku is really like the church of J fashion, if you really want to say that. And this and the main founder of Pretty said that at that time in Japan, especially in Harajuku, many up-and-coming designers were making original clothes and creating a sort of movement, but there was individual and fun clothing everywhere, and they liked cute things. So they selected what they thought was cute to their eyes and then sold it at their shop. So it's really difficult to find early photos of what the interior of Pretty used to look like, because even books published by Angelic Pretty usually start with the creation of Angelic Pretty in 2001 and don't include anything about the select shop. So this is a picture from 1995, which was published in the magazine Nene, and you can see that it's really different to what you would think of Angelic Pretty today. And you can see advertisements for other brands on the wall in the back. And this is what the caption of this picture was in the magazine. The products Pretty deals with are mostly indie items because the hats and accessories are handmade there, and it's not a large stock. So if it's something you want, there is one of a kind, so it might as well be that you can't get it. But the good thing is that about this place is that they take in regular customers' ideas and hopes and make clothes that they would like. So if you become close with the shop manager, you can definitely get something. You can order not only clothes, but small items and accessories. So at this time, probably if you wanted to wear something, you had to be best friends with the cashier there, because almost all the items were really tiny designers and just one-of-a-kind pieces. But then we can look at these pictures, which are pictures from a magazine, which was the same magazine, but a different issue, but also in 1995, which supposedly includes items from Pretty. And I selected the ones which I think look the most Lolita, but in these pictures, which is 1995, of course, you can really just see that this looks almost like Lolita does today, just with simpler styles and cuts and no petticoats, of course. But today you wouldn't find a cord like this, but at that time, this is just what Lolita looked like. And when we read interviews, they said that the first Angelic Pretty atelier was one bedroom, or like a size of one small bedroom, and that the movement was kind of underground. So they chose pink as their main color just because everything else was so dark and gloomy and underground. And these are pictures from 1999 from Fruits, but you can see the Pretty bags, which have the Pretty logo on them, and they almost look like the pink Angelic Pretty bags that you can get today. And also in these pictures, you can see some some sort of Lolita coordinates. But today, maybe probably no blouse, no petticoat, right? This was almost, you would get a good luck next time if you wore this. But I just think it's so fun how it's pink with black and really, really chunky shoes. But this is 1995, so we skipped quite a bit to get there. But I think it's easier to go topic by topic than by years, so we don't get confused along the way. So here, there's also, these are all pictures from 1999, and Angelic Pretty is really easy to spot because it's pink and frilly, and this doesn't even look like Lolita today if you thought about it, but it is what we would consider really true old school Lolita, which are very shorter skirts, no petticoats, and chunky shoes, of course, are a must. But since some of the other ones, you could just wear this today as is, and no one would ask anything. These just look like normal Lolita fashion. So I find these really, really nice to look at. And if you want to find these scans in high quality, I really recommend the website, which is Lolita History, which includes scans from almost every magazine that they could get their hands on. So you can look at every issue of Fruits, Kera, or any other just whenever you want. So then let's go to the 80s. Which way more stuff started happening. But first, let's look at our helpful explanation from Lolita Fashion, Lolita Dictionary. So what was really popular in the 1980s were berets, which of course are still extremely popular for Lolita. And other things which might have influenced Lolita fashion is round collars, wide gathered ruffled skirts, then bonnets and fabric-covered crinolines, which today, maybe probably most Lolita wouldn't wear because you would wear them as a petticoat, but it's still the same shape, and I think we are getting super close to actually just getting straight up Lolita fashion because it existed and was fully known in the late 80s. So now we have another cute little timeline where we can look at things that happened. So first, Olive begins publication in 1982, which is a very, very important moment for fashion in general. Then Cutie begins publication. Then Closet Charles opens, which was really just a secondhand store for everything music, fashion, and it mattered. But nowadays, of course, it's the most well-known secondhand store for Lolita in Japan. Then Jane Marple is established in 1985. Then, of course, Vivienne Westwood releases the iconic rocking horse shoes in 1985, which those shoes are the staple piece of Lolita which survived until today. And if you look at old school meetups, even from the 2010s, almost every single Lolita is wearing rocking horse style shoes, which is sometimes very funny to see. And I think even if you look at the Lolita timeline, there might be some pictures from meetups, and everyone is just in rocking horse shoes. Then, of course, Heart E is founded in 1987, and by the Starshine Bright in 1988. And we will get back to this, but there are some claims that their Lolita fashion was first time mentioned in a magazine in 1987, but this might not be exactly what it seems like on the surface. So first, let's talk about Olive a little bit, because Olive is one of the most influential magazines on fashion to ever begin publishing. And it was launched in 1985, and it was aimed at young women and girls, but it was a magazine for romantic girls. And it was read mostly by college students and high school girls. And maybe because the girls who read Olive tended to be a certain way and dress a certain way, or because a certain girls read that, or because they read that they wore that, is not sure, but the term Olive girl started to become really popular for girls who read Olive and dressed slightly alternatively in cute styles. But as you can see, Olive featured all sorts of styles, but well, some of the authors break down like Olive girl styles into 3 categories, and one of those is a girly style, which included floral prints and other feminine motifs, and a fairy tale-like feel. And a popular brand was, of course, Pink House and Milk and other brands. But some of these really do seem to be inching closer to Lolita, especially this one. This just looks like a Lolita dress. Today, you could buy this, and it would just be Lolita. But you can see that Olive really published all sorts of styles and stuff. And also what became popular was sort of a doll style, which is mostly just Milk. But it was very popular. And of course, we can't forget Vivienne Westwood, and we know Rocking Horse Shoes. But I think that if you look at the other things that she was creating around this time, they really, really do look like Lolita, and it really could have inspired a lot of maybe Japanese girls to wear this sort of silhouette. And I think on its own, maybe no, but if you look at all the other styles that were already popular, if you really combine it with this, and of course, Rocking Horse Shoes, like this dress could be Lolita if you really wanted to. Like, I would not blink twice if a brand was selling something like this today. So I think it's just fun to look at and see that it really wasn't a surprise that Lolita suddenly started existing. It wasn't overnight. And now we get to this part, which is, this is a scan of a magazine which is called Ryoko Tsushin, and it was published in 1987. And this double page is supposedly the first mention of Lolita fashion in print. But we will take a look at this because it's mentioned everywhere. It's quoted in a lot of places, even in the Japanese Wikipedia article, that this is the first mention of Lolita fashion. But I found a really, really good blog which included amateur translations of this because I don't speak Japanese. And we can look at some of the parts because it starts, before we knew it, Lolita fashion became super popular because it fit into the current Japanese social and mental structure. Now girls who both wear and act like Lolita are flooding the streets. I want to shout, no more Lolita. I'm sorry if it's a little too ironic. We have written these pages with the hopes that you will become one step closer to being an adult, which would suggest that Lolita fashion is something that already existed for a lot of years for this author to be so tired of Lolita girls that they want them to change, which of course we would think that it's not like this because Lolita wasn't really around before then, as we saw. So how could this author be so tired if this was actually Lolita? And the article next includes a list of points, which blues are yes and the blacks are no. And we'll look at some of them. But the explanation for is that yes is like a chic and esprit girl, which is basically a French-inspired, sophisticated woman who, and of course, no is a kitschy Lolita girl, of course. So some of the first one is that when she hears Lolita, she associates with Naboko, that's the classy French girl. And Lolita, when she hears Lolita, she associates it with passion. And this seems to imply maybe that the chic girl is educated and has read a lot of books, or probably that when she hears Lolita, she associates with something dirty and wrong, which is probably what they were aiming for. And of course, someone calling a chic girl cute is not a compliment, but sometimes someone calling it's not a real compliment until Lolita gets called cute. And this is really just the idea that you should grow up and be an adult and be a sophisticated woman. And this still fits with Lolita. Like, you could describe me this way and it would probably be fine. But some of the other ones later are a bit weird. But for chic girl, her real age is a mystery. But for Lolita, instead of looking at her actual age, she looks like she's 6 or younger and calls all over the older men, even who are the same age as her, Oji-san, which of course, how old do you think I am? I'm not 6, I'm 24, but still, I think I fit into this stereotype pretty well. And then chic girls wears a balloon skirt with high heels, but Lolita wears a balloon skirt with Mickey Mouse shoes, which is a little bit confusing because what they mean by Mickey Mouse shoes is really not clear. They mean like white-toed shoes with Mickey Mouse ears, but also this doesn't really fit with Lolita how we would imagine it. So this is like a first clue that this might also not really be about the type of fashion. Of course, the chic girl is bored of following what Chanel is doing because she's sophisticated and has her own style. She's not following any trends. And the Lolita girl, she just bought some Adidas, which is just baffling, but maybe it's more because Adidas in the 80s was the chic new brand that all the young people were wearing. They didn't care about adults. They were the new generation, so maybe she is not really mature because she buys Adidas miniskirts or something. And of course, for a chic girl, anything, she looks glamorous in it. But for Lolita's, the figure is a mystery, which of course is the point. You don't want to wear tight-fitting clothes when wearing Lolita, but apparently it's the wrong thing. The chic girl, she's been interested more in skincare than in makeup because she is naturally beautiful, I guess. And Lolita's recent signature style is thick eyebrows and transparent glasses, which is another little weird point, because maybe clear glasses were popular in the 80s, but they are definitely not popular in Lolita, or were never popular in Lolita. I know it's a little ironic, because I wear them, and I have thick eyebrows, but probably the only Lolita I know who wears it like this. So I'm probably the wrong person to be saying this, but this is not really representative of Lolita in general. And of course, the chic girls' perfumes can easily be named because they are from well-known French brands. And Lolita has to wear the most trendy perfume because in this article, the Lolita girl is just following trends blindly. She has to watch the latest movies in some of the other points. And every time she sees a movie, she has to say to her friends, "Did you see this already?" and stuff like that. So the chic girl likes to eat a variety of things. And Lolita's only likes spaghetti, hamburger, and curry, which is another point which just seems to imply that the Lolita girl is an immature little child who can't eat a sophisticated diet and is not healthy because she doesn't eat vegetables and fruits. And of course, the chic girl eats ice cream with a spoon because nothing she does can be seen as not dignified, of course. And the Lolita girl just think it's cool to eat gelato while walking around and catching people's eyes, which I don't really understand, but this seems like a typical comment of why are you wearing alternative fashion? Do you want to just get attention? This really just looks like something you would see today. And of course, the chic girl wants to live in the countryside, but the Lolita only wants to live in the city. But I don't think that's a signifier of any style. I think that's just a personal preference. And then the chic girl can spend the whole weekend without seeing someone. Because of course she has interesting thoughts and is comfortable alone. She can read her sophisticated books and stuff. But the Lolita girl, if she goes 2 hours by herself, she has to call her friend to talk on the phone for at least 2 hours. And I'm sorry to say, but this is true about Lolitas. I'm sorry, but we do talk on the phone for 15 hours if we call each other. But I think it's fun. I think it's fun to have friends. I don't see how this is wrong. But if you look at all of these points, and there's more of them, so if you search for this, you can read all of them. But I think it's a little redundant to go through every single one. But the context for this is that this doesn't really seem to be describing Lolita fashion. It's maybe using Lolita girls as more like an adjective of some type of young person or an alternative youth who want to follow trends and stuff. So it's not really describing a specific fashion style, probably. But this purple part says, "Goodbye, Lolita girls," or something like that. So it's just a very confusing article. But the other thing is that the Lolita girl is inferior for wanting attention. She wears clear glasses, Adidas, and stuff like that. But it's maybe more like describing someone of the new generation, like alternative youth, and they were called Lolita girls, and of course braided. But maybe somehow the term Lolita fashion then got used later to describe, or maybe these people went on to wear Lolita. It's not the creator. I don't want to imply I know where the name Lolita fashion came from, because that's a can of worms that we will not open today, because every single Lolita you ask has their own little theory about where it's from. So this is maybe just a possible indication that the term Lolita was being used to describe young people. And this is just very close to the actual inception of Lolita fashion. That using the words Lolita fashion in the article seems like it should imply Lolita, but really does not. But what's interesting is that this magazine also included a spread of evening wear, which was a recommendation for people who want to abandon Lolita girl style and wear something more sophisticated. And these are all Western brands like Jean Paul Gaultier and stuff like that. It's just evening wear. There is zero old-fashioned brand from Japan in these pictures. But doesn't this just look like Lolita? Like they want to abandon flouncy skirts that are knee-length with petticoats to get under the knee-length skirts with petticoats, and I'm like, who's going to tell them that this just looks like Lolita? So this is another clue that the article is really not talking about Lolita fashion, because if it was, these wouldn't be the examples of what to wear instead to be more adult and sophisticated. But these are all just evening wear, but it's really just kind of funny if you look at it now that probably is not really talking about Lolita. And now we can get to the decade where everything happened, basically. And if we think about it, yeah, a lot of stuff did happen, so we're not going to talk about all of it because we would be here for 14 days. But I just chose some interesting little things that we will look at. But of course, from the 90s, Lolita already existed, so a lot of influences were naturally just continued until today. So mini hats, headdresses, and bonnets, of course, are just standard Lolita headwear. Thick bangs and sharp bangs. Not all Lolitas wear bangs, but a lot of them do, because a lot of headdresses and bonnets do look really good with bangs, and they just look cute. So for people who can pull them off, I hate all of you, and I wish your bangs fall out. And of course, here's a gathered frilly skirt that's just Lolita, and strappy shoes are just normal. And of course, big ribbons, long twin tails. My favorite hairstyles, jumper skirt, patterns, plushies, crinolines, and platform shoes. This is just basically Lolita already existed. So the things that really continued until today are just the normal parts of Lolita usually. And if you look at the timeline, this is the timeline until 1998, because in 1999, so many things happened that they have their own little slide, because this is not even everything. But if you look at it, so Timea was, of course, founded in 1990. And we can't really talk about Lolita without Gothic Lolita. And before, Gothic Lolita wasn't really that popular. It was more classic or old school sweet. But at this time, of course, Malice Mazers formed, and it influences Lolita fashion a lot. And later, Manazama coins the term EGL for elegant Gothic Lolita to describe their specific brand. And they also coined the elegant Gothic aristocrat, which is just Gothic fashion with long dresses, more like regular Goth fashion you would think about. Then, of course, Heart E store opens, the first one in 1992. And, of course, Metamorphose starts a freelance brand in 1993. And the funny thing is that the name Manifestage, Metamorphose Tendifele really doesn't mean anything, but the owner really liked the separate words. So Manifest Ange means manifest angel, while Metamorphose, of course, means change or transforms, and then he just added tense défilé at the end, which is a girls' era. So this is a manifest angels change girls' era, so it's just made to sound really cool. And then the manga Kijin Go Monogatari is first published in 1995, and then later airs an anime, which is a really, really fashion-focused story about a girl who wants to start her own fashion brand, Happy Berry, and for it to be sold in every single store possible. So she goes to like a fashion high school, and of course there is her best friend, and they have a complicated relationship with friendship and love, and they learn the true meaning of friendship. What is important is though that she's a fashion designer, and you can see some Lolita-like dresses, and it's one of the first times that Lolita is really in media that you can see it. And then, of course, Fruits begins publication in 1997, which is maybe one of the most, or the most important magazines for Lolita to ever exist, because it contains lots of street snaps and pictures of what people were actually wearing in Harajuku. But you can find the original first volume now digitized online, translated to English, but I can't show you because it's protected and it's not available for public use at all. So you can't show it to other people if you buy it. But we will see some street snaps a bit later. And then, of course, Kera, or as it was called, Kerouac, begins publication in 1998, and a 15-year-old Misako Aoki starts modeling for them in this time, which, of course, is only one of the most famous Lolita fashion models ever. So if we look at 1999 now, because we will get back to some stuff, but first, Mana establishes the EGL brand Mon Meme Moitié, which is still one of the most influential Gothic Lolita brands to this day. And here we can see their first advertisement and some of the first pieces. These are maybe few years later, but you can see that this just looks like the stuff that they make today. So these brands literally stay true to itself, but it's one of the important moments in history for Gothic Lolitas. And of course, Victorian Maiden is launched and creates their own website, which before this, lots of shops didn't have their own website and just relied on physical stores. So this is one of the more important moments. And of course, Victorian Maiden, important for every classic Lolita, but some of the first pieces looked like this, which was very dark with gold crown prints and crosses. And of course, Innocent World is established. These pieces are maybe of 2 years. I think these are from 2001, not 1999. But I think this paints a picture of what Innocent World used to make, which is just the same thing that they make now. Because after 2000, the 2001 was really the Lolita fashion boom, where Lolita started spreading internationally everywhere. So 1999 is really not that far away from that. Of course, Atelier Pierrot is established in 1999, which is, of course, our esteemed guest today, so you can visit their booth. But we can see what they were designing back then, which was really pretty long, flowy pieces with layers, and, of course, a blouse, which similar style blouse with big printed sleeves you can buy today if there are some left, if you wanted some. And then, of course, Baby the Star-Studded Bride flagship stores opened in Shibuya, and they also start selling online. So Lolita really starts becoming available for more people. And this is a picture of a recent store, but there is really 0 pictures available for what the inside of the first baby store used to look like, since it doesn't exist anymore and was moved a few streets over just a couple of years later. And also, another manga which we'll talk about is Paradise Kiss, because it's almost a sequel to Neighborhood Story, which we talked about earlier. It follows different characters, but the main character goes to high school and has to study, and she's like approached by a fashion club called Paradise Kiss to model for them. And there is, of course, lots of turmoil and personal stories. But at some point, she ends up at a model for one of the character's sisters, which the brand is called Happy Berry, which, of course, if you remember, is just the brand of the main character from the previous manga. And if you like cameos, the characters from Paradise Kiss and Neighborhood Story appear in Nana too, in extra pages, even though they are made by different publishers. But the characters often make good little appearances in each other's stories. So I want to talk about Heart E first, because it was a Japanese clothing brand, which is so sad that it was and it no longer exists, but it's focused largely on combining Victorian Edwardian styles with modern cuts and products, but they took a lot of inspiration from Alice in Wonderland. And they started first by making one-of-a-kind hats, which were sold in a store which was managed by, the store was called Hyper, and it was in Halafore, Harajuku, but they were making hats first, and I think they are just so cute and darling. And then their first piece of clothing was their rabbit coat in 1988, which it was still popular with Sweet Lolitas even in 2005. And if I got my hand on this coat, I would still really love it. But this was their first official piece of clothing aside from hats. But as of July 2018, they posted online on their shop that site will be closed, and then on July 25th, they said that they will no longer accept orders, and thanked everyone for 30 years of patronage. So sadly, Heart E does not longer exist after 30 years, which makes me very sad because I really like their pieces, and it's always sad when a Lolita brand closes after so many years. But it makes sense since 2017, 18, and 19 were kind of a down, calm little lull for Lolita fashion, and it really was in a low point during COVID. But now there is a resurgence, and some brands came back. Here's just a bigger look at the motif pieces, and here you can see Mana wearing one of them. And I just think that it's so cool to see what they looked like, and we can continue. Since I really don't know that much about Gothic Lolita fashion, I don't know if you could tell. And we are going to look at Kera now. So Kera magazine started publishing as Kerouac, which was inspired by the author Jack Kerouac and the novel On the Road, since they were inspired by his rambling of a actual tale of living life in the streets of America, and it resonated with the author's mission to capture a raw look at the streets of Harajuku. So if you're ever confused why the name is so weird, but this turned out to be a problem because this is very difficult for Japanese people to pronounce. So just a few years later, they started printing the other letters smaller, and then in the 2000s, they dropped them entirely, and it just became Kera for simplicity. But the first volume retailed for 480 yen, and it was the most real Harajuku street magazine by their own words, but it also features lots of street snaps, like fruits, but interviews, and also features fan art and stuff like that, because, and also lots of stuff from different brands. The final print issue of Kera was in June 2017, because it now publishes online, and sadly, Fruits is the same. It no longer publishes physically, but the author of Fruits was a little more harsh because he said that there are no more interesting kids to photograph in Harajuku. So take from that what you will. I don't think that's true. It's maybe just that there are way more tourists now, so it's a little bit more difficult. And also, I don't think the thing that allowed fashion to flourish there, which was that the streets closed on one day during the week for people to meet in one of the bridges. I don't think that works anymore, so it's probably a little more difficult to meet. Let's look at Cutie magazine from 1993, which published spreads about Lolita fashion and what Lolita fashion is and what you should wear. So first, blue. We can see a lot of pieces from Milk, which is why it is really connected to Lolita in a deep way. We can also look at red or pink. And there are pieces which look like Lolita, and then some pieces which definitely do not, like number 3. So from this, I would also say that the magazine published in 1987 couldn't be talking about Lolita, like it's a long year thing which they are tired of, since Lolita here is clearly still not yet super well defined. And we can also look at black or monotone, and some of them, or number 2, I don't know. Do you think that looks like Lolita or no? But these, number 17 and 18, I would like them delivered to my house, please. They are very cute. So let's just, at the end, look at some fruit snaps from 1999, so we can look at what people were wearing just before the Lolita fashion boom. Some of these just look like normal, everyday Lolita. For example, the blue dress just looked like classic Lolita. But if you tried this today, maybe people would try to give you advice for the length of your skirts and, of course, 0 petticoats. But at this time, I think it's just so darling what Lolita used to look like. Like here, like this is just so sweet. I don't think that is even considered Lolita today if you really wanted to. But it does have a skirt, which has volume, and chunky shoes. Here you can see sweet Lolita with really huge brown boots, which I don't think you can see much today of these types of shoes for sweet. And I just think these are so nice to look at. But there are really no surviving pictures from the 80s that much. But these pictures from the 90s are really, there is a lot of them. So you can just read Fruits magazine if you wanted to. And Angelic Pretty is, of course, or Pretty is easiest to spot since it's pink and usually frilly. And there are a lot of Peter Pan blouses and stuff like that. So we can look at some other ones too. I just think that this is what really old school Lolita look like. And of course, some of them do have petticoats, but of course, some of them also don't. The colors are also matched in a way where you wouldn't really think to do that much today. But you can clearly see that this is Lolita fashion, and this is what they were trying to wear. And of course, we have to have some darker colors as well represented. It's up to my discretion that I chose some of these pictures because I think that they look like they might be Lolita even a little bit. But this one is just the Lolita that we wear today. So this is really where the style was concrete and had a clear definition. So some more little pictures. And I want to end at this picture because this is from 1999 and quite late in the year. And I think that this just really shows that Lolita became what it was, and it had clear rules, and if you met these people today, it wouldn't be different or weird. So now that it really just looks like Lolita normally. And I would like to thank you for staying with me and listening to me ramble. And if you want to learn more, but probably can't read super fast, but here are all the sources that you could look at. And thank you for coming. And hopefully you can look at some street snaps and feel happier later.